What if I told you that there was a man so wealthy, so influential, he could buy Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and all the billionaires who are currently alive, and still have gold left over? A man whose travel across the desert with thousands of soldiers, servants, and camels packed with pure gold changed the world's economy for more than a decade. This is the story of Mansa Musa, the richest man that ever walked this earth. Whispering desert winds that sing in the dunes. Beyond the golden heat haze of the Sahara, a caravan flows to the edge of the horizon, camels in silken robes, guards in armor that shines, slaves bearing glinting gold dust in decorated ivory chests. In the middle sits astride a bearded, dignified figure in robes thickly embroidered with threads of gold. The sun glints on his crown as if even the heavens recognize his wealth. It is 1324. And the world is on the threshold of experiencing a miracle that it would never forget. Before Mansa Musa became famous to the world, before Mali was referred to as the jewel of West Africa, the land was a patchwork of kingdoms fighting for dominance. The Mali Empire itself had been carved out of what remained of its ancestor, the Ghana Empire, by warrior kings known as Sundiata Keita. In the early 14th century, Mali lay as a golden ribbon along the Sahel, embracing the Atlantic Ocean to the west and the Sahara's endless dunes to the north. Its throbbing heart was the Niger River, a lifeblood that fed its people, carried its commerce, and supported its cities. Legendary trade centers along its shores like Gao, Jen, and Timbuktu, which would resound in every corner of the globe one day, flourished there. Mali was endowed with gigantic riches, rich soil, fish-filled rivers, and most significantly of all, gold. Gold was so rich there that gold was as common as dust. The empire rested on the wealthiest gold fields of the medieval world, and with the trans-Saharan trade in its control, the riches of Mali flowed like a rich river into the treasury of the rulers. But even during this golden age, the throne was insecure. Kings were born and slain by rumor at the king's court. In 1312, disaster struck. The ruling Mansa, Abu Bakr II, a man obsessed with the ocean, vanished on a disastrous voyage, sailing west into the Atlantic and never to be heard from again. With the throne empty, Mali hung in the balance. And then a new king came along. A man whose dreams went as far as the desert, and whose dreams were as boundless as the gold at his feet. His name was Musa Keita I. History would not recall him simply as a king, but as the Mansa Musa. Musa Keita I was not born to sit upon the throne. He was a Muslim, a cleric, an orderly, a royal deputy, a deputy of the king, as it turned out. His destiny changed course when Mansa Abu Bakr II announced his second and most ambitious venture. Abu Bakr had been told by traders of lands far beyond the Western Sea, where rivers of fresh water flowed into mountains of silver. Resolute to locate this new world, he built a fleet of 2,000 ships and appointed Musa as his Khalifa, the temporary ruler of Mali while he was away. It was supposed to be temporary. But the sea has a tendency of holding those who enter it. Weeks turned into months. No envoy returned. No sails across the western horizon. The people grumbled among themselves that the sea had swallowed up their king. The court looked to Musa. The merchants came, seeking assurance of the trade route. The scholars came, seeking ongoing patronage of the madrasas. The soldiers came, swearing allegiance to the person sitting on the high-backed throne of gold. Musa Keita I was enthroned in 1312 as Mansa, King of Kings, of the Mali Empire. The vision of a ruler. From the very beginning, Musa recognized that being a Mali leader wasn't really about protecting its borders, it was about shaping its future. He built the army so that North Africa to inner Mali caravan routes were guarded by fighters who wielded spears and sun-painted-on shields of Mali sun. He formed commerce with Berbers in return for salt, cloth, and horses for gold. But Musa's aspirations were not limited to riches. He envisioned Mali remembered not only as a country of riches, but also an Islamic center of culture and learning. He imported scholars from Cairo and Andalusia, engaging them to construct schools, mosques, and libraries. To him, religion and riches were the two pillars which would make Mali immortal. The weight of gold. Even with his reforms, Musa could not ignore the reality of his empire's treasure. Mali's goldfields, in Bambuk, Bure, and Gollum, were the envy of every ruler in Africa and beyond. The empire produced so much gold that it dominated the global supply, and yet, Musa understood that gold's value lay not in hoarding it, but in using it to project power. And thus, at the age of 11 on the throne, Musa made up his mind to do something which would place his name in history for all time. He would make the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj, not as a holy pilgrim, but as the world's greatest king. What he did not know was that this journey would shake the world economy, alter the fate of empires, and make Mansa Musa a household name from Cairo to Constantinople. It is said that in Mali, gold speckled the dust in the streets and riverbeds shone like sunlight. But to all who reached the royal city of Niani, the imperial capital, it was even more daunting. Mansa Musa's palace was unrivaled anywhere in the world. Towering walls of mud brick, burnished to a dazzling sheen, encircled the enclosure of the king. Domed towers of pounded gold pierced the city sky. Date palms towered over courtyards, shading, and marble fountains spat cool, clear water into pools where lazily swimming koi fish glided. Inside the audience hall, the floor was covered with rugs that brought designs from distant Persia. The throne itself was a masterpiece, ebony and plated all in gold, its lion's head-like legs. To the side were guards in formation, their spears topped with silver, their armor emblazoned with copper and ivory designs. The helmets of each of the men were glinting in the sunlight, for even Malian warriors had gold as an emblem of the success of their king. Mansa Musa's treasure chests overflowed with solid gold bars stacked on top of each other like bricks. Bags of gold dust wore the king's seal in the warehouses. Merchants from across the Sahara arrived during the day, camels loaded with goods, Chinese silk, Venetian glass, Indian spices. Every merchant knew that to trade in Mali was to trade in wealth beyond his wildest dreams. But Musa was no common king who hoarded wealth in private. Gold to him was an instrument, a power tool. To the poor, he handed out alms without end. To scholars and artists, he gave gold to create works that would bring glory to the empire. To rival kings, he sent golden gifts that were both a gift and a threat. Mali could not be conquered. In 1324, the Great Pilgrimage Invitation was issued. Musa decreed that his trip to Mecca would not be another one of history's great ones. Orders were issued in every part of the empire. Let the people view the power of Mali. Let them behold the blessing of Allah on our earth. Preparations were enormous. 60,000 men were chosen to accompany the king, soldiers, students, officials, and servants. 12,000 slaves, each one bearing a gold staff, were chosen for the procession. Hundreds of camels were filled with bags of gold dust weighing nearly 300 pounds apiece. Even horses were adorned with gold bridles and saddles studded with gems. From town to town, all talked of the trip. Before the caravans came rumor riding. The King of Kings travels to Mecca, they whispered, and he has enough gold to buy the world. For Musa, the Hajj was not just an exhibition of extravagance, it was a message to the Islamic world that Mali was the center of power, culture, and religion. Yet in his own mind, he was fully aware that this spectacle would bear his name in the minds of everyone who saw him. As the first camels wandered into the scorching heat of the African sun, their shadows lay out across the barren desert, the Malians were amazed. They knew that they were witnessing the breaking of legend. What they didn't understand was that this journey would flip the economies of nations inside out, devastate certain cities, and lift others to unprecedented heights. The golden wave was going to breach the Sahara, and there was nothing to stop it. The caravan moved like a rainbow river of gold through the Sahara. Weeks it moved, turning its course between the endless dunes, the camel bells jingling in the arid air. The sun hammered down upon them, baking the sand to a glistening sea. And at its center sat Mansa Musa, the Lion of Mali, the richest man in world history. In the distance, the travelers would see the cloud of dust long before they would catch sight of the caravan. Next came the flash, glinting gold in the sun off the armor, staves, and finery of the thousands of men. The beat of drums echoed over the desert to signal the arrival of the king. Every oasis town that he passed left in wonder. Merchants closed their stands, villagers clogged the streets, children shouted, "Come, King of Gold." Musa greeted them all, distributing bountiful gifts, a sack of gold dust here, a gold armlet there. Gold existed endlessly to him, and generosity was power. By the time the caravan rode up to Cairo's gates in 1324, the city was in an uproar, the good kind. The Sultan of Egypt himself rode out to greet Musa, for no one could refuse a king whose treasure was the stuff of legend. Crowds lined the streets eager to catch a glimpse of the guy they had heard rumors of. Musa rode into town on horseback dressed in silk brocaded with elaborate designs, the bridle with emeralds studding it. His guards marched in uniform, the sun glinting off their golden spears. Musa began his legendary magnificence in the bazaars. He purchased gorgeous silks, spices, and strange objects, always paying in gold. He gave bars and dust of pure gold to merchants, officials, and the poor. He gave so much, that Cairo started becoming overloaded with it. It was like a miracle, at first, but before long, Musa's generosity had far-reaching effects he could never have imagined. With this much gold suddenly entering the market simultaneously, its worth plummeted. Prices went through the roof, and the economy spiraled out of control. Years on, Cairo's wealth worked tooth and nail to reclaim its lost terrain. Historians support that he single-handedly created one of the worst inflationary periods that the medieval world had ever witnessed. In terms still relevant today, it was as though one individual had destroyed an entire economy, not out of cruelty, but out of magnanimity. News of the pilgrimage traveled as fast as the desert breeze. Merchants took the news to Venice, Genoa, and further afield. European cartographers began to put Mansa Musa's face on their maps, a black king clutching a huge golden globe, symbolizing the limitless wealth of West Africa. When Musa entered Mecca, his name was already legend. But Musa's hajj was only half done. He had gained the world's attention, now he would bring that honor back to Mali. The return trip from Mecca was not a return, it was a victory parade. Mansa Musa had left Mali as a king, but he would be coming back as the most famous man in the world. The first Mali villages perceived them off in the distance, an even larger caravan than before, loaded with spoils from Arabia, Egypt, and beyond. Drums thundered down the hills. Children ran ahead, calling to their people. Old men lined the road, arms open in benediction, as Musa rode on a white stallion clad in red velvet. Behind him rode scores of camels with gold, silks, manuscripts, and gems that burned like fire in the African sun. But Musa was coming back with more valuable than gold. He had met scholars, architects, and poets in Mecca and Cairo, and now some of them were part of his caravan to Mali. There was Abu Ishaq Saheli, the Andalusian architect whose talent could turn sand and stone into palaces. Musa had recruited him to make Timbuktu a city of beauty and knowledge. As they rode into Musa's capital, Niani, the city broke into song. But already in Musa's mind was a vision greater than any throne, to make Mali the cultural capital of the world. The work began immediately. Saheli constructed the Jingareber Mosque, a masterpiece in desert architecture with walls and minarets colored baked earth, and which seemed to pierce the city like sentinels. Musa ordered it filled not just with the devout, but with scholars of all subjects. Caravans were now carrying more than gold, books, scrolls, and manuscripts. Musa built the Sankore University, one of the world's greatest libraries, containing writings on astronomy, law, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. Timbuktu was no longer a trading outpost, it was the center of the world's knowledge. Under Musa's command, Mali's cities glowed like lanterns in the night. Markets buzzed with spices, ivory, and foreign cloth. Music and debate echoed from the streets, the rhythm of a civilization at its peak. From Venice to Morocco, sailors, merchants, and scholars whispered softly of Mansa Musa. He was a king of gold, certainly, but he was the chief architect of an empire wherein gold and knowledge walked together. His time saw maps redrawn to place Mali on the map. On the famous Catalan Atlas, there is Musa's face there, a black king with a golden ball held by the hand, with firm eyes, with unbeatable riches. But his greatest legacy that he left us was not in vaults or in deserts, but the understanding that Africa was not just a resources continent to be looted, but a continent of scholars, empires, and visionaries who could write the books of history differently. The markets at Timbuktu still pulsed, the summons to prayer still resonated above the rooftops, but in the palace at Niani time was different. Mansa Musa, a man whose name could rend the ears of kings on continents, moved more slowly now, his mind burdened. The silver in his beard caught the light as he moved through the palace gardens, fingers brushing over the leaves as if he were feeling the passing of years. The laughter of children in the distance reminded him of a time when Mali's golden age was still unfolding before his eyes. In his final days, he no longer led vast caravans across the desert or welcomed emissaries from far-off lands. Rather, he sat quietly with his students, listening to verse, debating philosophy, and recalling the miracles that he had seen in Mecca and Cairo. His people said that his voice became softer, but his eyes retained the same flame that had established an empire. At his last public appearance, he appeared on the upper balcony of his palace. Before him the wide square of Niani stretched, crowded with his people, vendors at the market stalls, short-prong armored men packed close, women with loads of wicker on their shoulders, boys perched on the shoulders of their fathers. They all looked up to the man who had given them a kingdom the world could not look away from. The desert wind blew across his robe, richly embroidered with gold threads, and for a moment it seemed as if the setting sun itself bowed down to him. He raised his hand, not in command, but in blessing. Silence wrapped the crowd, punctuated by the distant throb of a drum. None of them realized that it was to be the last time they would see him. When the news arrived that the great Mansa Musa had perished, the empire mourned in a way that echoed with sound. There were drums beaten in the blackness of night, but not to battle, nor to fight, but to weep. His body was carried off to some secret place on the Niger, some secret grave that hid itself from the world, where but for a handful of souls ever knew where it lay. The planet swallowed it, the sand burying the path until even the breeze forgot where it was. But his story would never be lost. Centuries rolled into millennia, but still his name was mentioned, carried by storytellers by West African firesides, written into the margins of ancient maps, written into the picture of chroniclers. At the vellum's yellowed surface, he sits, his black hand enclosing a golden orb, his unwinking eyes appearing to declare, "I was here. I constructed this with my very own hands. And no one will ever forget." And so, many a century after the gold dust is dust and the palaces have crumbled to the ground, the myth of Mansa Musa continues to walk the desert winds, carrying the reverberation of Mali's golden fantasy.